Michael Zimmerman for Infowars.com. I'm here outside the Tampa Convention Center where a Trump rally just let out. I am here with Mike and Rick, uh, who are experts in cybersecurity and want to talk about how the U.S. is at risk.
Go ahead, Mike. I'll let you start.
Yes, sure. We had spoke a little bit previously about 2 years ago now. A company called Mandiant at the time, currently FireEye, and the FBI released a report about a hacker group that's located out of China, referred commonly as APT-1, which was basically related back to the Chinese government, a branch of the military of the Chinese government, which was actually actively attacking and breaching companies in the top 500 sector of the U.S.
And it was, I think, this year that they a new report came out that they changed that function of the government over to China's equivalent of their CIA. They handed that responsibility over to, and it's a constant thing. The company we work for it employs a lot of people, but it's a constant threat to every U.S. Any company that has intellectual property that is valuable, has any value, it is at risk from Chinese attack groups. And I think Mandiant tracks, 28 known ones. And there's a lot more unknown. I think there's an equal or greater number of unknown where they've grouped them together, where they believe they can track the function of the organization as being an entity, but they don't know who they are. But it's an ongoing, constant thing.
So is this something people also need to be concerned about when it comes to our infrastructure, such as our grid?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say, well, from the Chinese as well as other. The attack that took place in Georgia when Russia attacked, first they took down their grid. Our systems in the United States, both everything water, sewer, electric, are all vulnerable. They're on old SCADA systems that are very vulnerable.
You're talking about systems that were built back in the 70s and 80s, some of them. These are systems that are 20 and 30 years old. When you look at, even Windows system, main computer systems that are months old now, you find compromises for and vulnerabilities. So when you're talking about a system that's, been out there and not very well supported for 30 some odd years, it's terrifying when you think about what could be done to those, especially when you consider how simplistic those systems are. And they weren't made in a time like today where we know hey, there's bad emails can infect my computer and I got to be careful of files that I open up. There's a lot of people that work on these old systems in infrastructure that they don't have these safety precautions, any kind of security measures,
it's admitted
or
too.
Minimum security measures.
It's admitted now. There's reports out there admitted that they know the Chinese are poking around in our SCADA systems. And if they're admitting it, how much is going on that they're not talking about?
Yeah, how much more is going on? So this is really something we need to be concerned about.
Absolutely.
As a country, going forward. I know John McAfee, he was running for president on the Libertarian ticket, and I think he's the only candidate that has really made a big deal of, we need to really secure ourselves as a nation when it comes to cybersecurity, because, any of these attacks from China or Russia really could affect our nation.
Actually, absolutely, the national security. And then, there's companies that, almost everything that we do is contracted out. The Lockheed Martins, Raytheons, all, or even infrastructure. All of that stuff is contracted out. It's not the government doing that work. So the private companies that hold that data are, the Chinese are smart. They know that's not where the data's held. They know it's in the private companies. That's where they go.
And it's so easy. We've seen multiple times where, just like you mentioned, where a contractor is the one that's compromised. And, whereas, we may have a very strong security system on our network, but if we're working with a third party that it's a small company, they don't have much in the line of security, it's fairly trivial to compromise that network, which is connected to ours, and then you can simply go from one network to the other and compromise.
And they know those contracts are going to be plugging into the government networks as well, which actually comes back to the whole Hillary email thing. It is silly, honestly silly, to think that her email wasn't compromised. You stick any system out on the internet, and generally an unpatched system, what is it? They don't. It's not even. It's minutes before it's compromised.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, I'm not saying her system wasn't patched, but there's zero-day vulnerabilities that are released all the time. To think that her system wasn't compromised is, it's the equivalent of sticking your head in the sand, because I guarantee you stand up any Exchange server, email server on the internet with a firewall, whatever, and within 24 hours it's going to be compromised.
And that's something where, even as someone, that works in this field of security, if I were to sit there and I made my own email server and I put it out on the internet, I would not want to run it myself. That's the last thing I would want to have it run through a third party where I can rely on someone else, so if something happens, it's not my fault.
And if you put our company information on that server, we'd fire you.
Exactly. I would have no repercussion. You would have full 100% right to do that.
Well, yeah,
absolutely.
That's the other. I've worked with companies and I've had a top secret clearance in the past, and the paperwork you go through and the background check and the agreements you sign are all contrary to what Hillary did. I saw people when I worked for other companies that were defense contractors unintentionally leak information and were fired from their jobs or prosecuted, and they didn't go to jail, and that was for unintentional, deliberate, intentional deception and exposure of data. Yeah, she belongs in prison.
And that's one of the other things that's really kind of telling to me is, not only did she not give us all the emails or not produce all the emails that need to be looked at, the fact that she went through and deleted in a fashion that could not be forensically recovered. As someone who does computer forensics quite often, when I heard that it was completely wiped, that told me something, because that's not something a normal user knows how to do.
What, like with the cloth?
Yeah, we're not talking I just went and deleted everything. I went and clicked delete. We're talking somebody went out of their way to use software that specifically writes ones and zeros over the entirety of the hard drive multiple times, which makes data irrecoverable from that hard drive. If it's fairly trivial if you just go and delete data or just overwrite data on a hard drive, more often than not, I can go back and recover that in a matter of hours usually. But the fact that she went through and did a DoD, what's called a DoD standard wipe on the system. Yeah, you're talking a 7 or 9 times wipe of ones and zeros across the hard drive to make it completely, unrecoverable. That to me tells me someone went out of their way specifically to get rid of that data so that you could not go back and find anything.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've got people, actually considering her to be the next president when, she should be in prison. Thanks, guys. So for more reports, you can go to Infowars.com.